I just spent the last 8 hours watching Formula 1, which can only mean one thing. Formula 1 is back for 2024 and it is the end of day 1 of preseason testing. Now, even though people always say, oh, there'll be plenty of time to do a quicker lap later, or there's plenty of time to catch up for the teams that are struggling, with only 3 days of testing, for drivers like Max Verstappen and George Russell, who were the only drivers on the grid to do the entire day for their team and not split it with their teammate, it means that they only have half a day left before that's it. Bang, we're into practice, we're into qualifying, and we are in to the 2024 season. So there definitely isn't a lot of time with only 3 days of testing, but here is everything you need to know at the end of day 1. First of all, let's take a look at the classification at the end of day 1, and it was a very familiar driver and a very familiar team at the top of the timesheet, with Red Bull and Max Verstappen over a second quicker than Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz in second and third. Now, I should say, it doesn't say on this graphic, but no team apart from Albon in the Williams used anything softer than the C3 medium tyre. So yeah, whilst we didn't get the juicy softer tyre runs, which I'm sure are going to be coming in day 2 and day 3, yeah, this is what we have for now, but Max definitely did do a pretty decent lap. That was quite ominous for the rest of the grid, at least at this stage of preseason testing. Again, 1.140 seconds ahead of Lando Norris, and also completing 142 laps, which was, as a team, the second most on the grid behind Haas, who did 147. Behind the top 3, we had Daniel Ricciardo in RB. Now, they're definitely going to be a team that I'm going to be talking a bit later on. I think they were very impressive, at least initially from what we can gather. And then we had Pierre Gasly and also Lance Stroll, who kind of sandwiched the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc with his teammate Fernando Alonso in 8th. The Aston Martins were also very impressive, just very quick from the outset, no major issues, both did a very decent amount of laps. Aston Martin logging 130 laps in total, which was the 4th highest on day 1, so that was very good. Oscar Piastri, McLaren overall had a good day, but yeah, Oscar did have a few issues in the morning, with Zhou Guanyu in the Sauber completing the top 10. And I do want to actually quickly say that there was quite a lot of funny moments with the commentary team not really knowing what to call the Sauber, not really knowing what to call the RB. So yeah, that was definitely interesting to see. Now, outside of the top 10, we have the likes of Williams, and they definitely did have a bad day. Again, I'll get to them a little bit later on. Logan Sargent had a big spin at turn 10, with Mercedes having a quietly decent day, but yeah, still plenty to see from them. Yuki Tsunoda in the other RB was the unlucky number 13, with Valtteri Bottas in 14th in the other Sauber. Again, Alex unfortunately stopped on track. He is in 15th place. And then right at the back of the grid, we have the 2 Haas cars, with Kevin Magnussen in 17th and Nico Hülkenberg in 18th. Although, as I said, Haas did log the most amount of laps out of any other team, with 147. So let's talk about the teams that I think had a good first day of preseason testing, and I think there's no other team to start other than with Red Bull. Right from the morning session, actually, obviously they had kind of all of the attention on their car, because we finally got to see much clearer images of their side pod, their air inlet, and just their car in general, because yeah, their car was one of the more, let's say, obscured cars in darkness during their launch. And I mean, yeah, their air inlet certainly got people talking. They've gone down a completely different route compared to last year, which of course was the big shock during preseason testing, because after you have a car that wins 21 out of 22 races, they thought that the best way to go was revolution, not evolution, and we got to see the brand new side pods with a very unique design, with basically 2 air inlets. A very, very skinny vertical inlet that's right up against the chassis, and then a very skinny horizontal inlet that's kind of just below that kind of overhang that they have on their side pods. So yeah, that definitely got a lot of people talking. Clearly, the car was very quick right from the outset, and I think that's my biggest takeaway. It's very difficult to draw into the times because, you know, is the car actually 1.1 seconds ahead of the field? Probably not. But the one thing I can say about the Red Bull is that apart from some very early laps on a very, you know, difficult and dusty track on hard tire, which were pretty funny to watch by, you know, with Max Verstappen struggling, every single time that Max needed to push the car a little bit more, get a little bit more out of it, he was able to almost effortlessly. And that's the thing that I look for when it comes to teams like Ferrari, for example. Ferrari overall, I think, looking at the times and looking at the laps, had a pretty decent day, but every single time that we saw the likes of Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc try to push that a little bit more, you know, the rear was sliding a little bit, they had a bit of a lockup, whilst with Max in the RB20, it was just effortless. So yeah, it's a perfect day for Red Bull, and I think a big worry off their shoulders, because Again, I'm not going to tell you whether they are a second and a half, ahead of the field or whatever, but the one thing that times do tell you is that this team is not going to be in the midfield. They're picking up right where they left off in 2023, and they're going to be championship contenders once again this year, and absolutely the favorites, I'm sure, going into Bahrain. So yeah, it was a perfect day for Red Bull, I think, especially when you do consider that they did bring this brand new concept, and regardless of how dominant they were, you never know 100% if it's going to work until the thing hits the track. And I mean, again, Max could lean on the car so easily. It looked very stable in terms of the suspension. Out of all of the cars, it was definitely bumping the least on the straights and through the corners. So yeah, at least for now, we need to see obviously more of it in the hands of Sergio Perez on day 2. But at least for right now, it clearly is not doing anything untoward that the team didn't expect. And overall, it is a great start to 2024 for the defending champions. The other two teams who I also think had a very good day, or at least, when the people leave the garages, I think they're going to be pretty happy with their day's work, is RB and McLaren. Now, McLaren did have a little bit of a slow start to the morning. Oscar Piastri had a few issues, and even before Lando Norris got in the afternoon, the team also had to make some unexpected changes. So yeah, he got into the car a little bit late, but once he did, I mean, not only was their pace very strong, but Lando just kept pounding around and doing the lap. So it was a very impressive 72-lap stint by Lando Norris. I think Oscar was a little bit more compromised, and it was a great start. It was exactly what I expected. I wasn't anticipating McLaren too much because after their amazing car in the second half of last year, them evolving the concept into this year, I kind of expected them to be really strong right from the get-go, out of the box, and they are certainly going to be a lot happier in 2024 than they were 12 months ago. Have they caught Red Bull enough to become race winners and title contenders? It is way too early to talk about that, but yeah, those times by Max were pretty ominous. We're still waiting to see the really juicy times from McLaren, but at least again, right out of the box, the best thing that I can say about them is that their car, I think, is going to be another podium contender, and hopefully maybe more. We need to have a little bit more data, but yeah, hopefully the drivers were happy with it. But the surprise of the day was undoubtedly the RB team. The team with one of the best liveries on the grid and absolutely the worst name on the grid, but their car definitely delivered. Now, we know that for 2024 they have took even more components from the RB19, so yeah, clearly we can say that last year's Red Bull is still competitive even amongst the 2024 field. But yeah, it was just a car that in the hands of Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo, although they didn't do a massive amount of laps and there was a few mistakes, a few lockups there and there, it pretty much set decent times from both of the drivers. There wasn't too many kind of reliability issues, and it was one of those cars where even there was actually a journalist on Twitter that pointed out straight away during the morning session with Tsunoda whilst he was watching at turn 10 that the car just looked really good. The drivers had a lot of confidence in it, and I must say, having been lucky enough to go to preseason testing in 2022, I can't say enough how much you can actually, when you're there, you see so much more than you do on the broadcast. Your brain and your eyes they're able to pick up little details and nuances about cars that you just don't see while watching the broadcast. So yeah, clearly the RB looked strong both in terms of, the eye test and also on the laps. But yeah, we do need to, again, have a bit more data. But in that battle of the midfield, that closer connection with Red Bull, the likes of Williams and also the likes of Alpine as well, they have got to be at least a little bit worried looking at the promising pace of RB and especially in the hands of Daniel Ricciardo. So now let's talk about the two teams who I think are going to be a little bit disappointed at the end of day 1 and certainly are going to be looking to do a bit of catching up on day 2, and that is the Haas team and also Williams. Now, in terms of Haas, although they did do the most laps out of anyone with 147, which is really good because the one thing I do remember from 2023 is that they did suffer a few reliability issues there and there, so it's good that they had a very smooth day with doing, 147 laps between their two drivers. Having said that, the pace of the car was a little bit disappointing. Now, even going into the season, brand new team principal Ayuki Komatsu said that he expects them to be at the back of the grid, which was a startling but also realistic kind of, admission of where the team is right now. And to be honest, that's exactly what I saw from day 1 of preseason testing. Every single time the broadcast cut to the Haas, it was it was bouncing around all over the place, it was locking up, the drivers didn't look comfortable, even when you're trying to turn in for turn 1, while some of the other cars were a lot more sharper. Even if they had a bit more fuel on them, the Haas was just a little bit more lazy, missing the apex. You can see that the drivers are getting on the throttle a little bit later, so it was kind of exactly what we expected. So yeah, not too much more to say about them. The team knows that they're at the back of the grid, and even if the car is going to be a lot better in qualifying with Hulkenberg doing miracles, the big question is, have they sorted their tyre management over the course of the race? And I think that's probably the thing. That's why they did so many laps, perhaps, to kind of see if their correlation matches. So even though the pace of the car doesn't impress, maybe behind the scenes, in terms of the stuff that we don't know, it has impressed the team. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that. But in terms of Williams, they're definitely leaving as probably the most disappointed team at the end of day 1. Lots of little issues there and there. Albon stopped out on track right in the morning with a fuel pump issue, despite doing an okay amount of laps. And then Sargent also in the afternoon had a big spin at turn 10, but did manage to save it. And even though the team did a total of 61 laps in total, which obviously isn't very good, their day 1 did finish very early with a suspected drive shaft issue. So yeah, not a great first day for Williams. Obviously, it doesn't mean that alarm bells have to be ringing off, because let's not forget, this was actually the last car to be unveiled to us. And James Vowles also admitted that this was because the team was pushing right up until the deadline, right up until the last possible day. So yeah, perhaps it's still a bit of an undercooked car, and clearly the team still needs to kind of get their stuff together. But nevertheless, not too much more to learn from Williams. They'll just want to have a bit more of a smoother day on day 2. And that is pretty much the main talking points at the end of day 1 of preseason testing in 2024. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to come back tomorrow for all of the big talking points from day 2.